Rick Riordan presents Dragon Pearl by Yoon Ha Lee. Chapter 9. Byung-ho was busy with the ship's controls after that. At least they're shooting to disable, not destroy, he muttered. Before I could breathe a sigh of relief, he added, "Don't get too comfortable. It'll zap us both if they board." My stomach clenched and my palms felt clammy. 4 ships against 1 were bad odds if they caught us unable to gate. Even I knew that, and the Red Azalea wasn't exactly a battle cruiser. The fact that the enemy fought as a quartet was bad an omen as well. 4 was an unlucky number. It signified death. Mercenaries went around in groups of 4 to strike terror in their victims. "Can we signal for help?" I asked. "Already done," Byung-ho said. "There ought to be a battle cruiser on patrol near this gate. I just hope they're not too busy elsewhere." After scanning the onboard computer's help guide, I located the cockpit controls for the Red Azalea's defense systems. They had to be better than nothing. As far as I could tell, I would just need to flip some levers, tell the system to which target to prioritize, and let the computer do the calculations. "This isn't so bad," I said to Byung-ho when our defenses took out an incoming missile in a bright flash. Even though I knew better than to expect to hear anything in space, it was mildly disappointing when the explosion was silent. The scan system only emitted a sad little blip to mark the occasion. "Check our ammunition level," Byung-ho said tersely. "The Red Azalea has upgraded defenses, but mercs are faster and meaner. They can afford to wait for us to exhaust our anti-missiles. At least they're not likely to destroy us. A bucket like this is worth more to them than intact. So we're sitting ducks." My hands clenched and unclenched as I searched the dash for a display that would tell me how much ammo we had left. Found it. To my dismay, the bar was draining toward empty at a frightening rate. "Don't we have any shields?" I asked. Byung-ho hesitated. "We do, and they're on, but they've tended to glitch ever since." Yikes! He shoved the lever to one side. Dizziness overcame me as the Red Azalea veered away from the latest burst of fire. The ship's maneuvers got worse before they got better. I wondered if I'd ever get used to the sudden accelerations. "Oh no!" I cried as a burst of violet fire hit us in the side. Several alarms went off, deafening me. 5 different emergency status screens came up in my control panels. I inspected the reddest one, which claimed that our life support had been hit. Byung-ho swore that when he had saw that. "We'll have to do some quick repairs. Go back into the engine room and get the computer to help you put it into emergency mode. The automated diagnostics will take it from there. I'll tell the system to give you access. At least the name in emergency mode would be easy to remember. And use the handholds or you might get knocked about. Good luck." After that, he had no more attention to spare for me. I gulped as I unharnessed myself from the safety strains. I didn't know what scared me more, the Red Azalea getting blown up or our being boarded. If only I could will the ship to fly faster, away from a mercenary's clutches. My head swam. Our artificial gravity was fluctuating, and I magicked up regular boots, not magnetic ones, out of habit. While I could have fixed that, I didn't have time to get used to walking in magnetic boots. I caught one of the handhold straps just before the ship moved again, but still got bruised when I was abruptly flung into a wall. I concentrated on gripping the handholds and placing my toes in the foothold so I didn't get knocked around some more. My clothes were drenched in sweat by the time I'd made it through the ship's midsection to the engine room at the back. A hatch separated the room from the rest of the ship. Behind it, I could hear almost musical thrumming. I pressed my palm against the keypad, worrying that it wouldn't accept me. It would be ironic if I couldn't do my job because I couldn't get in. Byung-ho had been as good as his word, however. After a hair-raising shriek of metal on metal, the door slid open. The engine room was the loudest part of the ship, although not in an unpleasant way. I almost released a handhold because I was gawking at the fantastic arrays of crystals and the rows of glowing display screens like the ones in the cockpit, only more elaborate. The crystals gave the ship the ability to open gates and protect itself while in gate space. The more mundane fusion reactor powered the maneuver drive and everything else on the ship, including life support. Computer, I said, how do I put the engine in emergency mode? I clung like a bird to the side of the room as the ship rolled. I was starting to get used to the sudden maneuvers, though that wasn't exactly a good thing. One of the panels lit up. Damage has occurred to the life support shield and navigation subsystems, the computer said in a friendly voice. Which subsystem would you like to prioritize? Life support, please, I said. Another alarm joined the ones that were already going off. I could barely hear myself think. Could you make those less loud? I'm sorry, the computer said, still in that friendly voice. Alarm volume parameters are fixed according to 1,000 World Starship standards by the 5th accord of... I was sorry I'd asked. Never mind, I said. Just tell me how to deal with life support. The computer jabbered a list of procedures to follow. I had to tell it to slow down and gave me an overview of what went where. I hated the delay, but randomly pressing buttons wouldn't be useful either. Captain Hai or Byung Ho, or whoever normally dealt with the engine, had stowed a toolkit in the side compartment. I opened the kit eagerly and hooked it to my belt loops so the tools wouldn't drift away or worse, rain down on my head during the maneuvers. Most of the gadgets looked familiar. For the first time, I was grateful for all the things around home that always needed fixing. I narrowed down the problem to one regulator that had been damaged by the Mercs fire. The details were a little murky, but the more I tinkered with the regulator, the more I realized the basics weren't so different from those of the ecosystem we used in our dome back on Jinju. Given how often it had broken down, I'd had a lot of experience with it. Maybe I wasn't a qualified technician, but I knew a few tricks. I wondered if we ever escaped the mercenaries. My work settled into a nerve-wracking routine. Every time something broke, I'd follow the computer's instructions, tunneling down the menus, rerouting damaged functions to backups, and so on, while all the while hanging on so I wouldn't get smashed when the ship jerked. My fingers ached. Still, I couldn't afford to relax. The comm system crackled to life. Good work, Yoon Ha said over the speaker. I appreciated the compliment, but I wasn't under any illusions that I'd fixed anything wrong with the Red Azalea. I just bought us a little more time. Whether it would be enough for help to reach us was another question. What would have happened if I hadn't? I asked Byung Ho. He didn't answer and I gulped. Had something gone wrong in the cockpit? We were now drifting aimlessly. Easy pickings for the Mercs? Were we now drifting aimlessly? Easy pickings for the Mercs? It didn't take me too long to make my way back to the front of the ship now that I'd gotten used to moving around in the flickering gravity. Young Ho waved a hand when he heard my approach and sat up straighter. He kept his attention fixed on the screens. I retook the co-pilot's seat. I managed to turn on the shields again after they glitched, Byung Ho said. That'll keep the Mercs at bay for a while. He turned to look at me. Seriously, good job back there. You sure you've never been on a ship before? I glowed at his praise, but I didn't have time for chit-chat. With the fox's nose, I couldn't escape the ranch of his nervous sweat. The rank stench of his nervous sweat. He was trying to mask his fear for my sake. Has anyone responded to our call for help? I asked. Communication frequencies were much slower than travel via gate and only reliable for reaching people in immediate vicinity, which was why long-distance messages were conveyed by courier. The local space station should have heard us and relayed the distress signal, but it was an open question as to whether anyone in a position to help had detected it. No luck yet, Byung Ho said. That no luck sealed our fate. Another blast took the Red Azalea from behind, according to the displays. The shield and strength indicators flickered red and plummeted almost all the way down to 0. Through the viewport, I glimpsed sparks flowering out ahead of us. If our situation hadn't been so desperate, it would have looked beautiful. The attack itself had made no noise, but then we heard a bang from the engine room. My stomach dropped when the musical thrumming of the engine sputtered, then stopped. "What was that?" I whispered. Young Ho blanched. He didn't hide the truth from me, which I much appreciated. "Maneuver drives down. We're just drifting now, thanks to inertia. They've herded us away from the gate, and they'll be boarding us next." He triggered a command, and the hatch to the ship's midsection slid closed. It would give us a little time. "Quick, do you know how to use a blaster?" I hesitated at the thought of killing. On the other hand, I didn't want to die. "Point and shoot. That's all there is to it," Young Ho said. "With our luck, they'll have personal shields too, but I refuse to roll over for them." He unholstered a blaster from his belt and handed it to me. "That toggle is the safety. Point it away from me when you flick it off. And yes, like that. I keep it fully charged, but in a firefight, you may run out of juice." "What about you?" I demanded. "After all, he's just given me his gun." "Don't worry about me," Byung-ho said. "I'll use the plasma rifle. It's temperamental. A beginner is better off with a simple blaster." He retrieved the rifle from a compartment behind the pilot's seat. It looked so large and bulky that I doubted I could have wielded it well, temperamental or not. I was strong for my usual size, thanks to all the menial labor I did, but I wasn't going to win any wrestling matches. I had good reflexes, though. Maybe that would help. While we waited for the intruders to arrive, I glanced out the viewport, suddenly resenting the distant stars and the colorful smidges of nebulae. We continued to float along peacefully. The Mercs, knowing we couldn't escape, had stopped firing. Byung-ho had guessed right. They'd get more valuable scrap out of the Red Azalea if they didn't shoot it up too much. Then the ship shuddered as though it had bumped into us at low speed. "That'll be the boarding party. Crouch behind the seat and get ready to fire if you see anything." My sharp ears picked up the sounds of Mercs aligning one of their ships with ours and forcing the hatch open, and the whine of the airlock cycling. I tensed up. How many of them would come for us? "Stay steady," Byung-ho said. "All that matters now is taking them out and hoping that friends arrive soon." He didn't have to tell me that the situation looked dire. On the other hand, I wasn't going to let my quest end here, not if I could help it. My palms started to sweat, and I shifted my grip on the blaster. My Mercs were eerily quiet. In the holo shows, boarding parties always yelled threats or fired randomly ahead of themselves. I hadn't expected this total silence. That didn't last long. The smell of ash and sparks and scorched metal caused me to wrinkle my nose, and I peeked out from behind the seat. I heard a thump, then stared in fascinated horror as the Mercs started torching their way through the hatch. A cutout panel fell forward with a clang, showering white-hot sparks. I spotted a flicker and a shadow edging into the Red Azalea's kitchen. Without thinking, I brought up the muzzle of the blaster and squeezed the trigger. The blast shot out, a straight line of fiery red. Someone with a deep voice snapped orders in jargon I didn't understand. The shadow pulled back. Byung-ho grabbed my arm and dragged me down behind the co-pilot seat. Great timing. A bolt sizzled over me, right where my head had just been a second earlier. My heart jumped into my mouth as I realized how close I'd been to being barbecued. While I could shapeshift into an inanimate object to fool the mercenaries into thinking Byung-ho was alone, I didn't want to abandon him mid-combat. It would only delay the inevitable anyways. Being stuck in the shape of a crate or wrench wouldn't get me where I needed to go. 2 more bolts flew over my head. I peeked out around the side of the seat and fired once at the shadowy figure I saw. I heard a yelp. 5 more people joined the first. Hastily, I withdrew behind cover again before the hostiles could roast me. Byung-ho's rifle bolts crackled down the length of the Red Azalea, throwing up sparks whenever they hit home. He was trying to force the intruders back. There were more of them than there were of us, though, and we were pinned into the cockpit. Still quiet, the mercs advanced. I wished they could yell curses or threats, mock us, anything. In their sleek, jointed suits, they scarcely looked human. One of them darted out and flung a small, spiky canister at us, a stun grenade. Yoon Ha yelled, "Duck!" He shoved me to the side. I hit a wall and yelped as the breath was knocked out of my lungs. Seconds later, the grenade went off. The flash blinded me, but I remained standing. I fired wildly, again and again, as I heard Yoon Ha's bubbling scream. This is it, I thought. I'm going to die in the middle of nowhere, and my mom will never find out what happened to me. I heard a noise. I aimed at the source of the sound and fired, only to hear the blaster giving a discouraging whine. I had run out of power. Still, I'd hit someone. I heard a curse followed by a dark chuckle. I'm done for, I thought, and I slid out of consciousness.